focus on what you can do. Have confidence in your abilities and know that you are a unique individual with rights. If you are a care partner for someone, we have to keep in mind that the person who you are supporting is a unique individual. That one person with dementia is simply one person with dementia. We respect that each person has a right to be treated with dignity and participate in decisions. We need to focus on the person's strengths and abilities and not just on their illness or what they can no longer do. In 2018, the Alzheimer Society of Canada launched the first ever Canadian Charter of Rights for people with dementia. The landmark charter is the culmination of over a year's work by the Society's advisory group of people with dementia, whose members represent different walks of life from across the country. The advisory group set out to define a set of explicit rights to give a greater voice and authority to those with dementia. The charter will help people with dementia, as well as their families, through challenging situations where they may experience stigma, are treated unfairly, discriminated against, or are denied access to appropriate care. Given this person-centered philosophy and the Charter of Rights, what can we do? So I think it's really important that we learn about dementia and the impact. Learn about the disease and how the disease can affect a person's abilities, such as communication. The more you understand their reality, the better you are able to provide the care or assistance that person needs. If you are living with dementia, then teaching others can support better and more open lines of communication. I think it's really important that we help to maintain a person's ability and their independence. Learning about the changes the disease will cause so that you have a realistic expectation of abilities. Try to find the right balance between offering help and support instead of stepping in and doing something for that person that they can do for themselves. For example, if someone is having difficulty remembering a word, give them some time to come up with it before speaking out. As people, we need to practice patience, though it isn't always easy. Don't lose sight of the person. While certain abilities will be lost, the person's emotions and feelings will remain, as will the need for companionship and belonging. Try to get involved or involve the person in activities that are meaningful to them and to fit with their abilities. This will go a long way in adding to the quality of life and help that person maintain a sense of self. What we have to learn is how best to balance between offering help and supporting independence. Whether it's words, songs, tears, facial expressions, or sighs, crossed arms, or rolling of the eyes, these are all ways that we communicate. We forget that so often it's more about what we are doing than what we are saying. The interpretation of those nonverbal cues can sometimes be very confusing for the person with dementia to comprehend. For example, I love to cross my arms as I sit and listen, but a crossed arm visual can also appear to be very turned off or withdrawn. This way of nonverbal may be comfortable for me because I understand that, but may cause anxiety for the person with dementia as they work to understand what has happened to make me appear withdrawn. I often laugh when I say, if you've ever had a teenager who's rolled their eyes at you, you can understand the true impact of nonverbal communication. Communication is more than talking and listening. It's an essential component of person-centered care. Always remember, communication changes with the progression of the disease and the changing abilities of the individual. Communication is how we express our needs, our desires, our perceptions, knowledge, and feelings. It's also a combination of attitude, tone, facial expression, and body language, an important part of our relationships because it's how we relate to one another. You know the old saying, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for good reason? Perhaps that's something we need to remind ourselves of more often. I know, especially in this time with COVID, where we look at the same 4 walls and 2 faces all the time, it can be difficult. Challenges can arise, but it's the time we take to take a breath and learn that the person that's trying to communicate with us is doing the very best they can. Challenges associated with communication can lead to frustration. However, by understanding what changes may occur, you can prepare, adjust, and know how to respond, helping to improve communication. As I've said, communication is a critical component of our life. It enables us to express who we are, and it allows others to relate to us. Communication involves understanding and interpreting. How you phrase a question can make a huge difference. Asking yes or no questions or giving a simple choice is better than an open-ended question. Do you want chicken for dinner? Or chicken or steak? Those things would be better than simply asking the question and saying, what would you like for dinner? We need to pay attention to the message we are sending through our words, our tone, and our body language. Changes in the ability to communicate can vary and are based on the person and where they are in the disease process. You can expect to see throughout the progression of the disease certain changes. You might see things like difficulty finding the right word, or using familiar words repeatedly, maybe describing familiar objects rather than calling them by name, easily losing a train of thought, or even difficulty organizing words logically. Reverting to speaking to a native language can be common, speaking less often than they would have before, and then relying on gestures more often than words. As you can see, a person with dementia will increasingly have difficulty in communicating as that disease does progress. Paying attention to how you are communicating and being a creative interpreter are 2 strategies for enhancing communication. Oftentimes we say to people, you have to become a bit of a detective, a Nancy Drew or a Hardy Boys, to kind of figure out what the request can be. You might be asking, what are some of the things we can do to help with positive daily communication? So maybe it's speak the language. People with dementia have been known to revert back to that first language as they lose the ability to speak. If your loved one grew up speaking a different language, maybe learn a common phrase or word that could bring comfort if you don't know that language. Sing along. It's just like the old Sesame Street, right? Sing a song. People with dementia remember songs because music and melodies can be stored in a different part of their brain that's unaffected by the disease. Singing is a way to connect. It's a way to communicate. Listening to favorite music albums together can also be very helpful. Minimize distractions. So turn the radio off, turn the television off, remove things from sight that are distracting. If possible, sit down face to face in a quiet and calm space. Being able to communicate with that one person without the interruption can make the process that much easier. The approach. So if they don't see you coming, engaging someone with dementia might elicit anxiety or even aggression. Approach from the front to allow time to process. Communicate with hand gestures, body language, facial expressions, eye contact, and touch can be increasingly important as dementia progresses. In this time of COVID, when so many of us are wearing a face mask, this might mean taking a photo of your smiling face and pinning it to your lapel as a way to show the person who you are underneath that mask. I want you to think about reinforcement. And what I mean by that is if you're asking someone about eating something, point to the refrigerator or pantry to reinforce the message. It almost turns into a game of charades sometimes if you need to. Express agreement or disagreement simply by using your head. Nod yes or no. And if you can say something without actually saying it, without actually using words, do it. A warm smile or a hug can convey a message just as strongly as words. As the disease progresses, it's helpful to use your body and your voice tone to help people understand. An outstretched hand invites participation. A warm smile is welcoming. Hands on the hips or shaking of your finger might come across as threatening. Body language can be something that we don't often think about, but it plays a huge role. A person with dementia may understand your body language more and your tone of voice more than the words that you're actually saying. Give your family member time to process what you're saying and give them time to express their thoughts too. Remember that reminiscing can be healthy, but avoid making things a test. Do you remember when? Or do you know my name today? Use positive rather than negative expressions. So for example, try things, instead of saying not like that, try it this way. Instead of saying, can you do that? Say, would you do that? As we go through some of these ideas and what we can use for support to talk and communicate, take a peek at this slide. There's lots of ideas where you can go or places to look or even books to read that may be helpful. So what I want you to think about is when we communicate with someone with dementia, think about their communications abilities. And I want you to adapt your communication style to fit their needs. The following tips can aid communication with someone who is having some communication difficulties. I want you to think about these things. Stay calm and relaxed as much as possible. Approach the person pleasantly and from the front so they can see you. If you start with someone with a wave and a smile, it knows it's a less frightening way to approach someone. Get the person's attention by saying their name and maintaining eye contact. Position yourself so that the person can see you. Keep your statement short and simple, and give the person time to respond, and give yourself time to understand. Maybe try some gestures or even visual aids. So when we look at this slide, this is often a question that we get asked. What happens when I don't understand? So if you say that you understand and you don't, you risk losing trust by lying, or you may anger your family member if they are expecting you to do something and it's not done. Instead say, can you help me? I don't quite understand. Include the person in the conversation, even if you don't think they understand. No one likes to feel excluded. The next thing I'm going to show you is a little video. It is a Teepa Snow video, and for anybody that doesn't know Teepa, she is a bit of a world-renowned dementia expert. She is an OT by trade from the States, but she has traveled the world to talk about what we can do. This is a short video. It's about 2 minutes, so I thought I would share it with you today. If you do see this video and you think you would like to see more of Teepa or learn more from Teepa, You can go to YouTube and you can literally search Teepa Snow. And the way it's spelled is Teepa Snow, like the white stuff we get. So I'm going to play this little video, and I hope I'll get from it as much as I did.
Now go ahead with your partner and ease off, and I'm going to tell you what to say. You ready? Yeah. And you need to practice. Here's what I want you to say. Move this hand out from between the two of you, because what you're doing is letting whatever you're worried about get between the relationship, and that's not going to help you in this case. Because what starts to happen is you don't even see the person. You're so busy being upset about whatever that is, you're forgetting about this relationship, which is the most important thing. Look at your person. Really look at them now. Turn and look. I know, yeah. And here's what I'm going to have you say to them. You ready? I'm sorry, I was trying to help. Now, as soon as they say that, what happens? Your intensity goes way down because they're apologizing for really intruding. And it's an acknowledgement that what they did wasn't the right thing for you. And that's a real important thing to get out there. Now, let me show you the next time. We've got some more words to practice. Okay, here's the second word you're going to practice. I'm sorry I made you angry. Try that one. I know. You're absolutely right. I had no business making you feel like that. So try that one. I'm sorry I made you angry. I'm sorry I embarrassed you. I'm sorry I made you feel stupid. I'm sorry I didn't mean to, but I treated you like a child. Now here's one of my favorites. I'm sorry. This is hard. Because what I'm acknowledging is this is really hard for me too. Because the person with dementia thinks we're in this and that we're not having a hard time. It is incredibly important that you say out loud how hard this is. Because if you don't tell me, you think I know, and I don't. All I know is you think you're the boss of everything. All I know is you seem to know everything I can't hang on to. All I know is every time I see you, you start. And you need to be able to say, I'm sorry, Mom. This is really hard. And sound like you mean it. And you'll be amazed how many times people will immediately back down and say, I know it's hard for me too. And suddenly you're in a different place than you were. And that's because you were willing to do something different.
You may find that you or the person with dementia that you're supporting has good days and bad days. Be respectful, sensitive. Ongoing communication is the key to positive relationships. As the disease progresses, you may notice that some communication methods change. For example, there might be some difficulty in finding the right words or using familiar words repeatedly. Give the person plenty of time to respond so they can think about what to say. Be patient and offer reassurance. It may encourage the person to explain their thoughts. One question at a time. Ask one question at a time. Easily losing a train of thought, difficulty organizing words logically, reverting or speaking to a native language. Don't interrupt unless it's requested. Ask what the person is still comfortable doing and what they may need help with. Discuss which method of communication is most comfortable for them. So maybe face-to-face, maybe email, maybe phone call. It's okay to laugh. Sometimes humor lightens the mood and makes communication easier. Don't pull away. Your honesty, friendship, and support are important to that person. Difficulties with communication can be discouraging for the person with dementia and for those caring for someone with dementia and their families. So consider creative ways to understand and connect with one another. Be the detective. These strategies are successful because they are based on person-centered philosophy that we talked about. The philosophy and the thinking of the Charter of Rights is one that views people with dementia first and foremost as individuals with a unique attribute, a personal value, and a history. So remember, if you've met one person with dementia, you've met one person with the disease. Each person will talk, act, behave, and remember differently. This is not simply because of what stage of dementia they are in, but because of who they are. Never underestimate the power of your touch, your laughter, or your smile. Thank you, everyone. Beth and I are here to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Catherine. That was a wonderful presentation. We do have a couple of questions. So the first one is actually from someone who's living with dementia. And they said, I get so frustrated when my daughter jumps in to finish my sentences. I know what I want to say. It just takes me a little longer to get the words out these days. How can I ask her to stop?
Yeah, so great question. I think the first thing you need to do is have a conversation with your daughter and let her know that, you're trying to get the answer. It just might take a little bit longer, and that if you get frustrated, you'll ask for help if you need it. Sometimes as care partners, we jump in because we want to help, we want to answer, and we want to support you the best way. But sometimes we need to learn that supporting means asking, what do you need from me right now? Are you okay? Do you need a little bit more time, or can I just be quiet and wait for you?
Great. And this question's related to that one. So this is a daughter asking, how long do I wait for my dad to come up with a word? And is it wrong for me to just jump in?
Yeah, so we want to give Dad the time he needs to try to find that word. If you see him struggling, or if a frustration is coming, then maybe offer, Dad, can I help? Or maybe we could gesture to things or point to things. Dad, let me know what it is you're looking for. I'm sorry, I can't quite understand. Help me. And see if Dad's able to offer a little bit that way.
Yeah. And it depends on the person too. Sometimes people want you to fill that word in for them so that the conversation can move along.
Yeah.
Whereas others want to find it themselves and really don't want your help. They just want the time to be able to do it themselves. So it really depends on the person with dementia and what they want and how they best find it helps. We have another question here. So my sister repeats the same question over and over and over. I tell her I've just answered that question. How do I get her to stop? Can I just ask her to stop?
Yeah, so again, another great question, and certainly one that we hear a lot of. What I would say is, first of all, if that question is, when are we going to eat, or when's supper, or when is, when's supper time, and is it supper time yet? Then maybe acknowledge that maybe your person is hungry, right? So look at the question and be a bit of a detective again. Pull out your Nancy Drew notebook and see if you can figure out if there is something related to hunger. Maybe it means saying to somebody, if they're asking, am I home, or is my sister coming, or those sorts of things. Maybe it's simply saying, tell me a little bit more. Tell me a little bit more about that. Maybe there's a story there that has to come out, and simply by saying, tell me more, right? You can do that. if you find those two things aren't really, the Nancy Drew answer, then maybe it comes back to acknowledging the question, but then diverting it. So if we acknowledge that question is, are we having supper now? No, not yet. But while we're waiting for the potatoes, let's take a walk in the backyard, right? So I acknowledge that question, and then I'm going to divert it so that with hopes, we'll take our train down a different track for a little while.
Yeah, that's true. Because for the person with dementia, that's the first time they're asking the question.
Right.
Every time they're asking the question. So it's very important.
We hear it a lot, but it's the first time for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you did touch on this a little bit, but this person says, my husband sometimes begins to speak Swahili, a language that he hasn't spoken since he was a small child. I don't speak that language and I can't understand him. Can you tell me what I can do?
Yeah, so this can be really difficult, as you can imagine, if Swahili isn't your language, and that is the language that your husband learned early in life, and that's the language he reverts back to. Imagine how difficult that communication can be. And I think the truth is, if you're open to learning a couple of phrases or key words in Swahili that you could offer him, that's certainly something you can do. There's so many opportunities online now to do those things. So there's an app that's called Google Translate that can give you a few words maybe in Swahili that you could help. The Nova Scotia Health Authority has an array of interpreters that maybe you could connect into. Or maybe it simply means going back to your husband and saying, honey, I don't speak Swahili. Can you say it in English? And see what kind of response you get from that. But I can imagine how difficult that could be. Maybe even gesture to things or point to things. Play the game of charades to see if you can figure out in Swahili and English what it is we're searching for.
Those are some great tips. How about this one comes in. Dad was telling us last night how he met Barack Obama. How should we respond to that?
I'd respond and I'd say, wow, you met Barack Obama? That's fantastic. And then I'd go right into, tell me about it. Because the truth is, the reality is that Dad met Barack Obama. And so we're going to meet Dad where he is. If it doesn't come to safety being an issue, then we're going to meet Dad where he is, right? Safety trumps everything. But if Dad met Barack Obama, I'd want to hear that story. And so simply tell me about it, Dad.
Yeah, you can get some great stories.
Yeah.
When you just ask, tell me more, like you were saying that they're asking to go home. Well, tell me about your home. What are you thinking about? And if they're asking for a sister, well, tell me about your sister. What are your favorite memories? You can get some great stories and some great conversations happening.
Yeah.
So another question. My husband, we asked that one. We have some big family gatherings, and Mom doesn't participate in them like she used to. What can you suggest?
Yeah. So, terrific question, and I'm sure lots of people come into this. If you have big families or big family gatherings, birthdays, Christmas, other holidays, that are important to you and your family, for so long, we often pull together as big families. But what we have to remember is, as the disease progresses and someone now becomes faced with multiple people with communications coming at them from all angles, questions from all angles, questions from all people, sometimes it can be really difficult to be able to manage that. And so if you see that Mom is really struggling with big family gatherings, then maybe that means, you know what, big family, although we love each other, we're going to do this in smaller groups because Mom will be able to to communicate better with us, and ultimately probably be a bit more relaxed, not so anxious, because we don't need to test her with all of our people around and try to get her involved in all of the conversations. Even for those of us whose brain is working the way it always did, big groups and lots of conversations can become, a whirling dervish. So imagine if you're struggling to communicate and trying really hard to get messages through and comprehend them. Those big groups can be very difficult at times. So if you do see those frustrations happening, sometimes it's better to say, look, I'll go at lunchtime today. Why don't you guys go at supper? Those are just different ideas, because it can be very overwhelming for people.
Yeah, all those different conversations, even if you're not participating in them, just hearing them in the background and all the noise can be overwhelming. Too much sensory stimulation. I've heard of families who have agreed to have one conversation at the meal, so that I wasn't talking to you and our brothers are talking and aunts and uncles are talking, but we have one conversation so that mom can follow what's going on instead of having too many things coming at her at once.
Yeah, super, right? What a great way that we accommodate, right? We are the ones that change the process. We are the ones that change how we would normally do things, because in big families it's really easy. We all want to talk over each other, but it's learning that we are the ones that have to make the adjustment to allow someone else to come in and be part of this. That's really lovely, actually.
Yeah. So this is a delicate subject here.
Okay.
My wife is using curse words that she never used before. Is that normal?
Yeah. So we get asked this question, and it is difficult, because if your person had never used swear words and suddenly they're pulling those swear words out, it can be difficult for people, especially if you're in a public setting. The way I heard this described, and I was very privileged actually to be in an education session with Teepa Snow, the lady whose video we just watched. And the way she described this was, she talked about our brain like a filing cabinet drawer. And when you pull that drawer of the filing cabinet, the information that's at the front of that cabinet is the newest information. And so that's lost first. It falls out of the bottom. The information at the back of that filing cabinet, those are things we learned long ago. And so we tuck them away, like a swear word or a curse word. And so suddenly those words that are stored at the back of the filing cabinet, or part of the brain that doesn't lose that ability, it's easy to grab. It's an easy word to come back with. But what I want people to remember is that words only have the power that you give them, right? It's just a word. I'm trying really hard to tell you what I want or what I need, and this is the word that I've grabbed, and this is the word that's come out. Although it can be a delicate situation for people in public or around friends, that suddenly your person is using words that would be considered off color. If you let people know that this is where we are, and this is just part of the disease, right? And it's just a word.
Yeah, and that's where those companion cards might come in handy too, just to
Great
sort
idea.
of smooth things over and say, we're not having a great day, and here's where we are.
Yeah. So the companion cards, if anybody doesn't know what Beth is saying or talking about, the Alzheimer's Society of Nova Scotia has some little cards. They're only about the size of a business card. One of them, and correct me, Beth, if I don't get the correct phrasing, I guess. One is for the person with dementia. So it's a really quiet and gentle way that this person, if you go to, say, a restaurant, you could lay it on the table, and it simply says, I have memory issues, please be patient. And the other card is if you were a care partner, where it says, I'm a care partner and the person that I'm with has some memory issues, please be patient. So it's a nice way not to draw big attention to everything. But that way the person, let's say that's hostess of the restaurant or the person that's your waitress or waiter. It's a nice way for them to be able to understand and better support everybody as well.
Yeah, and it's subtle and respectful.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've also heard it say, and I think it might have been Teepa Snow as well, say that those forbidden words, like curse words, are stored in a different part of the brain as well. And that may not be as directly affected. Same as music is in a different spot.
Yeah.
So we hold on to music for such a long time, and we hold on to some of those words that we're not supposed to say for a long time as well.
Yeah.
So you touched on this a little bit, but this person is wondering, how do I know what my dad is trying to tell me when I can't understand his words anymore? You talked about being a detective, but what are some of those things that they can look for? How do they be a detective?
Yeah, so maybe it comes back to using things like charades, like we talked a little bit about. You know, are you cold? Right? So we rub ourselves. Are you hungry? Maybe it means putting a fork, you know, lifting a fork to your mouth or rubbing your belly like you would if you were hungry. Maybe it means asking dad to point or gesture. And I think, you know, it goes back to that, what do I do if I don't understand? And, you know, you can ask first, and you start with, I'm sorry, I don't understand. Help me understand. And so dad might then be able to gesture. Maybe it means too, if someone looks like they're, you know, struggling or in discomfort, maybe it's taking note of, have they gone to the bathroom lately? Is it lunchtime, right? Is someone getting hungry? Is it coming to the end of the day and, you know, I just want to put my head down now because I'm tired, right?
Yeah, those are all great points and great things to keep an eye out for. And everybody's an individual, so everybody's going to have their own cues. And you as a care partner and someone who's supporting someone living with dementia, you tend to know your person best and are able to figure out those things. So if your person is living somewhere else, then telling those people who may be supporting them what cues to look for can really be helpful as well.
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to wrap up for today. So I'd like to thank you all very much for joining us. And Catherine, thank you for a wonderful presentation and some great answers. It's always nice to pick your brain. If you have any comments on today's presentation, you can send them through the chat box. If you have any ideas for future topics, we're always looking for more ideas, and we like to stay current and address things that are happening right now. So if you have any ideas, please put those in the chat box as well. Also, Claire is going to put up a quick poll we would like you to fill out before you leave. It's just one quick question. And as well, if you do have ideas and you're not comfortable with the chat box, you can always give us a call at the office at 1-800-611-6345. And it's our info line number, and it's up there on the screen as well. And you can leave us a message with your ideas for future presentations. And if you would like to have a confidential call with one of our info line staff, you can call that same number and just leave a message with your name and how to reach you and maybe a good time, and we will get back to you. So I'd like to, again, thank you all for coming. Have a great, safe weekend. Enjoy the sunshine.
See you here next week for the next one.